So why did I want to bring this up? I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me clearly. This little section right here said the last time the EPA tried to re-register the pesticide, it skipped this step and the court said that it was unlawful and required it. Absolutely anyone, let me repeat that. Absolutely anyone can submit a public comment on an agency's proposed regulations. Hello, guys. So I was reading over this article and I figured, you know what? It probably would be good for me to actually just share this article. So, this is a Newsweek article that just came out today. And it says the EPA seeks to bring back twice banned pesticide. And as I begin reading this, stick with me, guys. You'll kind of see why I wanted to share this as we go through it. But experts have been sounding the alarm after the Trump administration indicated that it would be bringing back a pesticide that was twice banned by two different federal courts due to the harm caused by the chemical. On July 23rd, the EPA released its proposal to approve registration for the use of dicamba on dicamba-tolerant cotton and soybean crops. Over-the-top dicamba is very effective for controlling herbicide-resistant weeds in dicamba-tolerant cotton and soybeans, an EPA spokesperson told Newsweek. In a quote, under the Trump administration, EPA will ensure that farmers have the tools they need to protect crops and provide a healthy and affordable food supply for our country. End quote. However, after the announcement, the Center for Food Safety, which was one of the organizations that filed lawsuits against the EPA re-registration of the chemical previously, issued a warning that dicamba can cause, in quotes, devastating damage to farms, home gardens, native plants, and wildlife refuges. End quote. Why it matters. Dicamba is an herbicide that kills broad-leaved weeds, and it is similar to the chemical 2-4-D. It is often used on home lawns, farms, golf courses, and roadsides. However, it has become a risky weed killer due to the high chance of drift damage, as the diffusion of the chemical harms surrounding crops and wildlife. Okay, stick with me, guys. Agricultural organizations that have warned that if the EPA were to bring back dicamba, the results would be devastating, as they have been in the past when the chemical was previously used. Millions of acres of non-genetically engineered soybeans, orchards, gardens, trees, and other plants were damaged on an unprecedented scale by the unintentional diffusion of the chemical, the Center for Food Safety reported. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, revealed that up to 15 million acres of soybeans were damaged by dicamba drift in 2018 alone. 15 million. Pollinators such as monarch butterflies and rusty-patched bumblebees are also threatened by the pesticide, the organization added, noting that beekeepers in multiple states have reported sharp drops in honey production due to dicamba drift. There have also been studies which found increased risk linking exposure to dicamba with colon and pancreatic cancers. David F. Goldsmith, an occupational and environmental epidemiologist at Milken Institute School of Public Health, George Washington University, Washington, D.C., told Newsweek. So what to know, guys? What is it that we really need to know here, right? The EPA told Newsweek that with the new additional mitigations EPA has proposed, the agency is confident these products won't cause issues for human health or the environment. However, experts have said the opposite. The proposal removes several restrictions that had previously applied to how farmers can use dicamba, Bill Freeze, science director at the Center for Food Safety, told Newsweek. Freeze explained that previously farmers could only spray during certain midday hours to avoid drift-promoting conditions, such as temperature inversions, that occur quite frequently in the morning and evening, a measure that has been removed. He said that dicamba manufacturers had proposed a cutoff date for spraying soybeans so that there would be no spraying after June 12th. to, quote, avoid spraying later in the growing season when the more neighboring crops are most vulnerable to drift damage, end quote. This measure was also not adopted by the EPA, Freeze said. The EPA is now proposing a temperature cutoff, which would mean that farmers can spray throughout the spring and summer unless temperatures exceed 95 degrees, he added. Now think about that, guys. 95 degrees. What do your plants do at 95 degrees? Okay, let's continue. This proposed restriction, however, would be completely unworkable and unenforceable, Freeze said. While George Kimbrell, legal director at the Center for Food Safety, told Newsweek the organization was still reviewing the EPA's plan, he said that it was a proposal that, quote, we will be arguing they should reject, but if it is finalized in the current form, then it is no better and arguably worse, end quote, than previous registration plans. In 2018, the first-term Trump administration, EPA registered multiple dicamba formulas for use, and the move prompted a number of food safety organizations to file lawsuit to challenge the decision. In 2020, the U.S. Court of Appeals ruled that the EPA had, quote, substantially understated risks that it acknowledged and failed entirely to acknowledge other risks, end quote. The court added that damage caused by dicamba was substantially underreported, and that the agency had, quote, refused to estimate the amount of dicamba damage, characterizing such damage as potential and alleged, when record evidence showed that dicamba had caused substantial and undisputed damage, end quote. This ruling deemed the EPA's move unlawful. Let me start over. This ruling deemed the EPA's move unlawful, making the sale and use of the chemical illegal. In the same year, less than 5 months after the ruling, the EPA again reapproved the use of the pesticide. And in 2024, the U.S. District Court of Arizona overturned the agency's move after organizations once again filed legal action against the EPA. The move by the EPA also comes as a contrast to the Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again campaign, which warned about the use of pesticides, reporting that chemicals had been found in the blood and urine of children and pregnant women at alarming levels. While the MAHA report linked pesticides to cancer and other diseases, the Trump administration last week said it had no plans to crack down on pesticide use in farming. Let me repeat that. While the MAHA report, the Make America Healthy Again report, linked pesticides to cancer and other diseases, the Trump administration last week said it had no plans to crack down on pesticide use in farming. So what are people saying, guys? Bill Freeze, science director at the Center for Food Safety, told Newsweek, none, and I quote, none of the many restrictions EPA has imposed on dicamba since its first approval in late 2016 have come anywhere near to reining in the massive drift damage this herbicide has caused, more than any other in the history of agriculture. This decision is a travesty, a betrayal of the many farmers and rural Americans who voted for Trump, end quote. Gurumurthy Ramachandran, forgive me for the mispronunciation, director of the Johns Hopkins Education and Research Center for Occupational Safety and Health, told Newsweek dicamba was removed or restricted in many areas due to its volatility and tendency to drift, which can cause damage far beyond the intended application zone. Even when used according to label instructions, environmental factors like heat and wind can cause dicamba to vaporize and move on to neighboring crops and wild vegetation, damaging sensitive plants that are not engineered to resist it. Okay? He added, dicamba was reapproved despite previous bans, primarily due to pressure from agribusiness interests and the ongoing challenge of controlling herbicide-resistant weeds in major crops like soybean and cotton. Ramachandran said, and I quote, gardens, fruit trees, and ornamental plants in proximity to fields can suffer severe effects from dicamba drift, causing loss of harvest and plant death. Homeowners may find their property damaged with little recourse, as dicamba industry can be hard to trace and not covered by insurance. People in agricultural areas may face higher risk of exposure with potential links to certain cancers and respiratory issues. Degradation of pollinator and wildlife habitats impacts food chains and ecosystem services, ultimately affecting food security and environmental quality. Let me read that again. Degradation of pollinator and wildlife habitats impacts food chains and ecosystem services, ultimately affecting food security and environmental quality. Cynthia Curl, a professor at the School of Public and Population Health at Boise State University, Idaho, told Newsweek, while the EPA has not identified dicamba as a carcinogen, some studies have found associations between dicamba exposure and certain types of cancer. She said, and I quote, American agriculture uses a large amount of glyphosate in production of products like corn and soy since the introduction of genetically engineered glyphosate-resistant crops. This substantial use has led to the emergence of glyphosate-resistant weeds, which require management through a different crop protection method. By introducing dicamba-resistant cotton and soybeans, farmers will be able to spray these crops with dicamba, killing the glyphosate-resistant weeds without harm to the crop. Curl added, I think there will be a dramatic increase in dicamba applications, much like was seen for glyphosate. This will likely lead to more off-target drift, which would be detrimental to any non-resistant crops, non-agricultural plants, and home gardens. This could also increase the amount of dicamba in the food supply. David L. Goldsmith, an occupational and environmental epidemiologist at Milken Institute of Public Health, George Washington University, Washington, D.C., told Newsweek the EPA proposed approvals for 3 products containing the weed killer dicamba, whose use was halted by a federal court in 2024, arguing it does not pose a significant human health or environmental risk. This new decision appears to be a boost for growers of genetically altered soybeans and cotton that are designed to resist weed-killing properties of dicamba. I am concerned that growers, farm workers, and the general public may be confused because of the reversal of EPA rules. Gerald LeBlanc, professor of biological sciences at the North Carolina State University, told Newsweek, and I quote, dicamba is being returned to use due to heavy lobbying from the agriculture industry. The industry claims that there are few alternative herbicides that can be effectively used in large-scale control of weeds. While glyphosate has been used as an alternative to dicamba, the industry claims that weeds are becoming increasingly resistant to glyphosate, requiring that a substitute be found. The industry claims that if use instructions are followed, drift can be minimized. Not everyone agrees with this, end quote. He added, and I quote, commercial gardeners let me back up. He added, commercial gardeners will be faced with the prospect that use of dicamba on neighboring farms will damage their crops due to herbicide drift. Loss of crops would have negative financial impacts on growers and reduce the availability and increase of cost of affected fruits and vegetables to the general public, end quote. So what happens next? There will now be a 30-day comment period where stakeholders can provide evidence and share input with the EPA before it makes a final decision. Kimbrell told Newsweek the reason for the comment period was that the last time the EPA tried to re-register the pesticide, it skipped this step. And the court said, court said that it was unlawful and required it, end quote. He said that the Center for Food Safety will be, quote, urging the EPA to reverse course and not let the pesticide industry pressure it into lawfully causing grave harm to farmers and the environment once again, end quote. He added that if they refuse, the organization would explore all legal options. All right, guys. So why did I want to bring this up? I need you to hear me, and I need you to hear me clearly here. We have an opportunity under what happens next, right? This little section right here said the last time the EPA tried to re-register the pesticide, it skipped this step and the court said that it was unlawful and required it. We have the opportunity here under this 30-day comment period where stakeholders can provide evidence and share input with the EPA before it makes its final decision. I say to us all that it would behoove us to take some time to see what this means for us and to make our voices heard. Will it necessarily make a difference in the end? We do not know. I cannot answer that. However, we do have an opportunity to make a comment based on what is being said here. So and I'm reading this. I hadn't even read this far, guys, but I will see if I can put together a link or so, at least to put on the screen so that you can see exactly where you need to go so that you don't have to go look for it if you want to make the comment, but do your own research. And if you are so inclined to make your voices heard, I implore you to do so. So, guys, I did find um, the rule that is on here. It says on regulations.gov that it is a non-rulemaking docket. Dicamba new use on dicamba-tolerant cotton and soybeans. This was created by the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency. And on this site, it's open for comments. You can see docket details, docket documents, as well as all of the comments on the docket. I have gone through and looked at some of this stuff, but what I want to show you now is the document that is the memorandum of what the EPA basically, like them putting this together. So the subject was posting EPA-HQ-OPP 2024-0154 to regulations.gov for public access. It talks about who did it: Lindsay Road Chief, Herbicide Branch Registration Division, Office of Pesticide Programs. This memorandum authorizes the posting of the aforementioned posting to regulations.gov for public access. Agency received applications from Bayer Crop Science LP, BASF Corporation, and Syngenta Crop Protection LLC for dicamba products proposed for use on dicamba-tolerant cotton and dicamba-tolerant soybean. The document memorandum supporting proposed decision to approve registration for the uses of dicamba on dicamba-tolerant cotton and dicamba-tolerant soybean and its supporting documents will be open for public comment from 7/23/2025 to 8/22/2025. So from July the 25th to August 22nd, 2025. The federal e-rulemaking portal is regulations.gov. That's their preferred method for comments. And they said follow the online instructions. You can also submit your comments, though. That's what this section here is talking about. You can submit your comments either by going to the federal regulations.gov site. You can do it also by mail here. And you can do it by hand delivery. That is right here. Okay, so there are instructions there. Also, again, here there are comments here, so I want you to see a few of the comments so far that are out here. This was something that was posted. I'll skip what someone from the EPA said if I could find. Oh, these are older. I forgot that. These submissions came up as older to newest, I think, first when I first saw them. But now that one's also. Okay, here's an anonymous public comment. So, There is someone that came out and said, I urge the EPA not to reapprove over-the-top OTT dicamba use, particularly in light of the 2024 U.S. District Court ruling in Arizona, which vacated the registration of Xtendimax, Ingenia, and Tavium. The court determined that the EPA violated both the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act, FIFRA, and the Administrative Procedure Act, APA, by approving these products without fully addressing their real-world impacts or providing adequate opportunity for public input. Critically, the court emphasized that the EPA lacked evidence that dicamba drift can be reliably prevented, even with label restrictions. This echoes the EPA's own findings. In its 2021 report, the agency stated it could not conclude that OTT dicamba use would avoid, and I quote, unreasonable adverse effects, end quote, citing over 3,500 incident reports in one growing season and more than 1 million acres of crop damage, plus injury to trees, gardens, and natural habitats. Despite updated labels and added restrictions, drift has persisted year after year, affecting nearby soybeans, vegetables, vineyards, and other sensitive plants. The EPA has not produced clear scientific evidence showing that volatility and off-target movement can be fully controlled under typical field conditions. The Arizona court ruling and the EPA's own data make one thing clear: dicamba's risks are not hypothetical, and they cannot be managed solely through label language. Until the agency can demonstrate with evidence that this product can be safely used and legally at scale, it should not be reapproved. Okay, so that comment was received on July the 24th. And I'm glad that I actually ran into that comment because what I also wanted to mention to you was the fact that there are rules that are tied to um, how to put in a comment that would warrant not just us saying something, but for the EPA, for the regulatory body to actually listen and hear. So that comment actually was an excellent example of that. I will see. I don't have the link up right now, but let me check right quick and see if I can grab the link, and then I'll come right back. But while I'm doing that, I was interested also in who the names of those companies were. So I went out and I was actually looking at Bayer, the Bayer name that was on there, and I ran into this. Uh, Bayer Crop Science LP is a part of Bayer AG, focusing on agricultural solutions. They develop and market products like seeds, crop protection chemicals, fungicides, herbicides, insecticides, and offer services to support modern, sustainable agriculture. Bayer Crop Science is a global leader in innovative crop science with a strong presence in over 120 companies. This Bayer also is the same Bayer that is right here. And I'm not going to open that. That basically, the namesake Bayer medication, that is the same Bayer company. But I wanted to bring up, because when I got to looking at this, I found this that said, why did Monsanto sell to Bayer? And I don't remember knowing that. But it said Bayer acquired Monsanto primarily to bolster its position in the rapidly consolidating agricultural industry and to gain access to Monsanto's strong presence in the U.S. market, particularly in biotech and seeds. The merger aimed to create a leading life science company focused on both health and agriculture. But what I also found interesting was, while I was looking at that, under defensive move, it said right here in this little section The merger with Monsanto was also, in part, a defensive move by Bayer in response to the consolidation happening in the agricultural industry, with companies like Dow and DuPont merging and Kim China acquiring Syngenta. So I thought it was really interesting, the companies that are trying to gain a product that's going to come onto soil here in the United States. Okay. Kim China has acquired Syngenta. Syngenta was listed on the list as one of the companies that's trying to get this passed. It was Bayer Crop Science LP, BASF, and Syngenta. Okay. At the bottom of the regulations.gov page, there is a link for commenting guidance. That's what I was looking for. So we're going to open that in a new tab. And this document says how you can effectively participate in the regulatory process through public comment. And it basically gives some good information that talks about the rules, talking about how to make your comments effective. And I won't belabor it, but I'll read very quickly. It says effective public comments often have one or more of the following characteristics. So an introduction where you explain why you're interested, a background section where you clearly identify the relevant part of the regulation you are commenting on, analysis that lays out your argument and evidence, including with clear citations to helpful research, and recommendations describing your suggestions to the agency and identifying specific changes you'd like to advise, and a conclusion, which recaps your main argument and lists your recommendations again. So they essentially say these are the components that you need to use, but they said best practices. There are some considerations and evaluative criteria that may help make your comments more effective. So consider the problem that the regulation intends to address. Why is the regulation needed? What is the problem the agency is trying to address? Is it actually a problem? Consider whether the proposed regulations are based on best available scientific, technical, economic, experience-based, and other information. So if you're aware of flawed, inaccurate information, blah, 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 say something. Consider whether the agency is missing a certain perspective, in this case, yours. Consider whether the costs of the proposed regulation are justified by its benefits, and consider distributional analysis and costs or benefits that are hard to monetize. Like, how is that going to affect our lives? How is it going to affect your crops, your land, your food? Would be some examples of that. Okay, and who can submit public comments, just in case someone's thinking, hey, we really can't do this. Let's read this. Absolutely anyone. Let me repeat that. Absolutely anyone can submit a public comment on an agency's proposed regulations. You do not have to be an academic, expert, or even someone who knows all of the ins and outs of the policy at hand. If you have something to say and think that your perspective could constructively add to the conversation, please comment. Okay? All right. I am going to stop right there, guys. Again, I'm going to put this on the screen so that you will have it. The link to regulations.gov and this specific docket so that you can get to it and make your voices heard. All right, guys, that is going to be it for now. As you know, my tagline is whether you live to grow or you grow to live, let's just get to growing. And what I'm saying to you on this day is that we are living to grow because we love doing that, right? And this is something that might impact it. And we are also growing to live. And I'm saying to you again, this is something that can impact it. So I implore you, do your research and make your voices heard. That's going to be it for now. Later, y'all.